My name is Mackenzie Reed, and for 8 straight years my parents treated me as if I were dead. No calls, no messages, not a single word. Then one morning my name appeared all over Forbes, and just a few hours later my phone lit up. A text from my mother. The first text in 8 years, Christmas Eve dinner at 6:30. Family only. Important discussion. I read it twice, and it felt like an old scar ripped open. I knew exactly what important discussion meant. It had always meant the same thing. So I replied, I'll be there. And that night I walked through their front door, carrying the one gift my mother, who had buried me 8 years ago, never saw coming. If this story makes your blood boil, or if your family has ever turned their back on you, just because you chose your own path, comment the city you're watching from and hit subscribe right now, because the next part is where the real drama begins. 8 years ago, I walked out that front door with one suitcase in the pouring November rain. I was 19 and had just told my father, Anthony Reed, that I was dropping out of Northwestern to move to California and build a fintech startup. He exploded. He shoved his chair back so hard it hit the floor, slammed both hands on the dining table, and shouted loud enough for the whole block to hear, "From tonight forward, Mackenzie. Reed is dead. To the Reed family. Dead. Do you all hear me?" My mother Joyce never looked up from her plate. She just pressed her lips together and kept pushing peas around with her fork. My younger brother Drake, 17, and glued to his phone even then, let out a short, mocking laugh and said, "Good, one less person stealing the Wi-Fi." Aunt Valerie, Dad's younger sister and the real day-to-day boss of Reed and Sons, leaned back in her chair, folded her arms, and delivered the final twist of the knife. "Don't come crawling back when that little fantasy of yours blows up in your face. You've just burned every bridge to your inheritance." I stood there, soaked coat half on, waiting for someone to say, "Wait, stop, she's still our daughter. Our sister, our granddaughter." The room stayed silent except for the rain hammering the windows. Then I felt a gentle tug on my sleeve. Grandma Eleanor pulled me into the hallway away from the table, pressed 5 crisp $100 bills into my hand, and slipped a small folded note into my coat pocket with her phone number written in blue ink. She cupped my face for a second, looked me dead in the eyes, and whispered, "Go make them eat those words, baby." That was the last sentence anyone in that house said to my face for the next 8 years. I took the Red Line downtown, bought the cheapest Amtrak ticket I could find to the Bay Area, and boarded the California Zephyr with nothing but the suitcase, the $500, and a dead phone. 52 hours later, I stepped off in Emeryville with $41 left. The first 12 months were pure survival. I bounced between friends of friends' couches, slept in laundromats when I wore out my welcome, and worked 3 jobs at once, 5 a.m. to noon, barista noon to 6 p.m., DoorDash on a borrowed bicycle, 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. office cleaner in the financial district. Some weeks' dinner was plain instant noodles and tap water 3 times a day. I showered at the 24-hour gym with a 7-day free trial. I kept restarting under different emails. I learned to code from free library computers because I couldn't afford Wi-Fi. I lived in a 180-square-foot room with 5 other people for 14 months, sleeping on a mattress that smelled like old takeout. When the heat went out in January, I slept in every hoodie I owned. There were nights I sat on the fire escape at 3 a.m., staring at the city lights, almost ready to buy a one-way ticket home and beg for forgiveness. Every single time I pulled out Grandma Eleanor's note, read her handwriting again, and went back inside to keep coding. I built the first version of the app on a cracked 2015 MacBook I bought off Craigslist for $200, teaching myself Swift and Python until my eyes crossed. I launched it with zero marketing budget and watched the first users trickle in, then hundreds, then thousands. Investors finally started knocking. I still never breathed a word back home. For 8 full years, the only voice from my old life was Grandma Eleanor calling once a month from a prepaid burner phone she kept hidden in her Bible. She never asked for money, Never lectured, never said, "I told you so." She just listened, told me she was proud, and hung up before the minutes ran out. That was it. That was all the family I had left. That morning, I was staring out my window at the San Francisco Bay when the Forbes article dropped. I opened the link out of reflex. My name sat at the very top of the 30 under 30 finance list in thick black letters. The piece called me the dropout who built an empire out of spite and code. It stated plain as day that the company I started on a broken laptop in a cramped rooming house had just closed its latest round at a valuation of exactly $128 million. I dropped into the leather chair phone still glowing in my hand, waiting for the wave of triumph I'd imagined for years. Nothing came. The apartment was dead quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant wail of a foghorn. There was no one to call. No one to scream to. No one to say, "Look, I did it." 8 years of total silence had made certain of that. Then the screen lit up again. Not a VC, not a reporter. A number I had deleted and rememorized 100 times. Mom. Christmas Eve, family dinner at 6:30. Important discussion. 8 words after 8 years. I read them until the letters blurred. My pulse slowed to a cold, steady thud. I knew that phrase by heart. In Reed family code, important discussion had always meant one thing: somebody needed cash. I stood up and walked to the glass wall overlooking the water. 9 months earlier, Grandma Eleanor had called late at night from her burner. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. She told me Reed and Sons had overexpanded, interest rates had spiked, and the banks were done waiting. Total debt $14.2 million secured against every store the house even Dad's 401 Keho. She didn't ask me to fix it. She never would. She just said, "I thought you deserved to know before it hits the papers." That same night, I set up a Delaware LLC, nested it inside 2 more holding companies, and began buying the paper. Quietly, patiently, one tranche at a time. By the time the Forbes reporter sat across from me in this very living room asking about my rags to riches story, I already owned every lien, every note, every default notice. They never suspected the buyer was the daughter they'd buried. I looked down at the city lights shimmering on the water and felt something shift inside my chest, cold and final. I opened the airline app and booked the last non-stop to Chicago, departing that evening. While the ticket loaded, I dialed the only number I'd never blocked. Grandma Eleanor answered on the first ring. "It's live," I said. "I saw it an hour ago," she replied, pride cracking in her voice. "You did it, Mackenzie." A beat of silence. "Your mother just invited me to Christmas Eve dinner, too. First time in years." I closed my eyes. "I'm coming." She exhaled slowly. "Be careful what you bring through that door, baby girl." "I've been careful for 9 months," I told her. "Tonight I stop." I packed one overnight bag, black dress heels, and the slim leather folder I kept in the safe. At SFO, I upgraded the rental to a black Mercedes GLE because I wanted them to see it pull up. As the plane banked east over the bay, I turned my phone face down and let the last 8 years settle like lead in my stomach. We touched down at O'Hare just after sunset. I switched off airplane mode. A second text from Mom appeared instantly, like she'd been hovering. "Can't wait to see you. We have so much to catch up on." I didn't answer. I took the keys to the Mercedes, slid behind the wheel, and pointed it toward the suburbs I once fled, with one suitcase and $500 to my name. This time, I wasn't running away. This time, I was coming home to collect. Christmas Eve, I drove through snow-covered streets into Oak Brook. The black Mercedes glided over fresh powder headlights, cutting through swirling flakes as I turned into the familiar cul-de-sac. The house loomed ahead, wrapped in layer upon layer of white LED lights that made it look like a department store window trying to sell the idea of family. Through the massive front window glowed a 15-foot Fraser fir, drowning in gold and crimson ornaments, exactly the same color scheme they'd used every year since I was 12. I parked behind Dad's aging Lexus, killed the engine, and let the silence ring for a long moment. Then I stepped out into the cold. Mom flung the door open before I hit the top step. Joyce wore the red velvet dress she only brought out for Christmas Eve, pearls clasped tight like armor. She pulled me into a quick, brittle hug that smelled of Chanel No. 5 and nerves. Mackenzie. You're here, she sang, voice pitched half an octave higher than normal. Dad appeared right behind her in his holiday blazer, hair thinner, belly softer. Anthony offered the classic man pat on the back, 2 firm taps. No real contact. Long time, huh? He said, eyes already sliding past me to the Mercedes gleaming under the streetlight. Drake slouched in from the den, hoodie half-zipped, phone lighting his face blue. He flicked his gaze up. Registered me gave a lazy chin lift. Yo, he muttered, then went straight back to whatever was more interesting on his screen. Aunt Valerie stood by the roaring fireplace, champagne flute dangling from manicured fingers, black sequins catching every flame. She ran her eyes over my coat. My boots lingered on the Hermes Kelly hanging from my arm like she was pricing it in her head. Well, well, she drawled, look what the cat dragged in. Nice bag. I opened my mouth to reply when 2 small, strong arms circled my waist from the side. Grandma Eleanor pressed against me lavender soap and vanilla and everything safe. She held on longer than decorum allowed, then pulled back just far enough to whisper against my ear, You did it, kid. Every damn thing they said you couldn't. My eyes stung for half a second. The foyer turned into a parade of forced cheer. Coats were taken, drinks offered, compliments fired like bullets. Dad steered me through the archway into the living room, narrating updates like a real estate agent, new hardwood, new chandelier, new 75-inch television mounted where the old family photos used to hang. We moved through the ritual. Mom asked about the flight, the weather in California, whether I'd tried the new sourdough place in the Mission. Dad wanted to know if Silicon Valley was still insane and if Tesla stock was really going to the moon. Drake, without looking up, asked if tech people actually worked or just played ping pong all day. Valerie kept circling, dropping little barbs disguised as jokes. Must be nice to have investors throwing money at you, and some girls get all the luck, don't they? I answered politely, smiled on cue, and watched them watch me. Every question carried a scale. Every laugh was weighed against how much I might be worth now. Grandma Eleanor stayed within arm's reach, topping off my sparkling water when no one noticed, slipping her hand over mine whenever Valerie's smile turned razor sharp. She never asked me a single question in front of them. She already knew every answer. Eventually, Mom clapped her hands. Dinner's ready. We migrated to the formal dining room. The table could seat 14, but was set for 7 gold-rimmed plates, crystal wine glasses, the same red and gold runners that had been in the family since the 80s. My place card, calligraphy perfect, sat at the far end opposite Dad, the same powerless seat I'd been assigned as a teenager. We took our chairs. A hired server appeared with the first course, roasted pear salad, candied walnuts, balsamic reduction arranged like modern art. Conversation stayed safely shallow, how pretty the neighborhood looked this year, how the snow was perfect for photos, how Aunt Valerie had found the most darling new decorator. Second course arrived honey-glazed ham, sliced thin garlic mashed potatoes, whipped to clouds, haricots verts with slivered almonds, the exact menu Mom had served every Christmas I could remember. Valerie held court complaining about impossible supply chain issues and unfair online competitors killing brick and mortar. Dad nodded solemnly, refilling glasses, making sure everyone stayed loose. By the time the plates were whisked away, the performance was polished to a shine. They laughed a little too hard at each other's jokes, passed the rolls a little too often, made sure I felt welcomed, missed, almost loved. I folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, and waited for the curtain to rise on the real reason I was here. When the last slice of ham hit the table, my father set his wine glass down with a hard clink that sliced straight through the fake holiday cheer. The hired server disappeared. The soft piano version of "O Holy Night" suddenly sounded ridiculous. Dad straightened his shoulders, folded his hands like he was about to give a boardroom presentation, and looked straight at me. Reed and Sons is on the edge of losing everything he began voice low and rehearsed. Aunt Valerie picked up the baton without missing a beat. We got greedy after COVID. Everyone was spending. We opened 4 new locations in 18 months. Then interest rates doubled, supply costs went through the roof, and the online giants crushed foot traffic. The banks issued final default notices last Thursday. Miss one more payment and they start seizing stores' inventory, this house, everything. Mom let out a perfectly timed sob, pressing her napkin to the corners of her dry eyes. 42 years of your grandfather's name, Anthony. 42 years of Reed and Sons on those signs. Gone in a heartbeat. Drake finally set his phone face down, stretched dramatically, and gave the table his best concerned brother face. It's actually pretty straightforward. We need $2.8 million to refinance the worst loans and buy 6 months. After that, we restructure, and we're golden. No big deal. 4 pairs of eyes swiveled to me in perfect synchronization. Dad leaned forward, voice softening into the tone he used when he wanted a favor from the country club committee. You've done incredibly well, Mackenzie. We are all so proud of you. The word proud hit like acid. This company is still your birthright. Your blood built those stores just as much as anyone's. Valerie jumped in syrupy sweet. We're not asking for charity. You'll get preferred equity, full interest, whatever terms you want. You'd be the hero who saved the family legacy. Mom reached across the table corner, tried to cover my hand with hers. I let her fingers rest there without moving. Please, sweetheart, she whispered, tears now magically appearing. We've missed you terribly. This could heal everything. We could be a real family again. Drake shrugged, already bored. 2.8 isn't even real money to you anymore, right? Just write the check, and we all move on. Grandma Eleanor's hand found mine under the damask tablecloth. Her thin fingers wrapped around my fist, warm, steady, unbreakable. She didn't speak. She never had to. I looked slowly around the circle. Dad's calculated calm, Mom's practiced tears, Valerie's predatory smile, Drake's lazy entitlement. 8 years of nothing. 8 years of ignored birthdays, unacknowledged achievements, no visits when I was sick, no congratulations when I closed rounds, no calls when my name trended on TechCrunch. 8 years of being dead to them. And now, the very day Forbes crowned me, I was suddenly sweetheart again. Suddenly legacy mattered. Suddenly blood was thick enough to demand millions. Dad tried one last push voice, dropping into the old commanding register that used to make me flinch. We'll put you on the board. Voting shares, full partnership. Whatever you need to feel comfortable. Just help us keep the doors open. Valerie nodded eagerly. My attorney can have papers ready by morning. You'd own a real piece of the company, not just some app. Mom squeezed harder, nails digging in just a little. This could fix everything, honey. All the hurt. All of us together again, like it should be. I gently slid my hand out from under hers, picked up my water glass, and took a slow, deliberate sip. The entire table held its breath. Grandma Eleanor's grip tightened once, a silent green light. I set the glass down with a soft click and finally spoke. 2.8 million, I repeated, letting the number hang in the air. That's what it takes to keep the lights on. Dad's shoulders relaxed, a fraction relief already flickering in his eyes. I allowed myself the smallest, coldest smile. Interesting timing. The room temperature seemed to plummet. Every face froze exactly where it was. I laid my fork down, looked at Grandma once, and pressed a single button on my phone. The front door opened with a violent rush of Arctic wind that made every candle flame bow. Snow exploded into the foyer in a white cloud. Heavy, deliberate footsteps crossed the marble without hesitation. Sawyer Brooks stepped into the dining room carrying a brushed aluminum briefcase still dusted with fresh powder. His charcoal overcoat carried the sharp bite of winter. He walked straight to the table, set the case dead center on the ruined Christmas tablecloth, right between the crystal candelabra and the half-eaten ham, and snapped the locks open with two crisp, metallic clicks. "Good evening," he said, voice ice cold and perfectly even. "My name is Sawyer Brooks. I am lead counsel to Mackenzie Reed." Dad shot halfway out of his chair. "Who the hell let you in my house?" Sawyer didn't even glance at him. He simply began removing thick document packets, lining them up like weapons on a rack. 9 months ago, he began every dollar of Reed & Sons' outstanding indebtedness, $14,200,000 across 7 separate credit facilities, was purchased and assigned to a Delaware limited liability company. That company is 100% owned and controlled by Mackenzie Reed. He slid the first packet forward. The cover sheet screamed "Assignment of Notes and Security Interests" in bold black type. Valerie lunged and snatched it. "This is impossible. We would have been notified." "You were Sawyer," cut in voice flat. He produced a second packet. "Certified mail return receipts to corporate counsel, recorded UCC-3 financing statement amendments, filed with the Illinois Secretary of State lender consent forms, executed March through August. Every single notice acknowledged and filed." He continued, unstoppable. Third packet, original promissory notes, each now bearing fresh allongas that read, "Pay to the order of Reed Acquisitions LLC without recourse." Fourth packet, recorded mortgages on all 11 retail stores, the distribution warehouse, and this private residence, every deed of trust listing the same new creditor. Fifth packet, personal guarantees executed by Anthony Reed, Joyce Reed, and Valerie Reed, each now payable exclusively to the Delaware entity. Mom's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor. Red wine bled across the white carpet like a fresh wound. Drake finally looked up, mouth hanging open. You bought our debt?" Sawyer turned another page. "Ms. Reed purchased 100% of it. Every lien, every default clause, every remedy." Dad's face turned purple. He slammed both palms on the table so hard the plates jumped and silverware flew. "This is blackmail." "No, Sir," Sawyer replied almost kindly. "Blackmail is a crime. This is ownership." He opened the final folder, one single sheet titled "Notice of Default and Acceleration of Indebtedness." As of 6:52 p.m. this evening, Reed & Sons is in material default on all facilities. The entire $14,200,000 is now immediately due and payable. Foreclosure sales on all collateral can be scheduled as early as tomorrow morning. Mom's eyes rolled back. She slid sideways out of her chair, completely limp. Drake dropped to his knees and caught her just before her head hit the floor, cradling her, while staring at me in horror. Valerie shot to her feet, chair scraping violently. "You planned this!" She screamed, voice cracking into something feral. "You set us up! You evil!" Dad was shaking with rage, veins bulging at his temples. "You will not destroy this family. Not tonight. Not ever, Grandma." Eleanor's fingers tightened around mine under the table, warm, steady, unbreakable. Sawyer closed the briefcase with a soft final click and stepped back. The room froze. The only sounds were Mom's shallow breathing on the floor and the wind howling outside. I let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Then I spoke low, calm, and perfectly clear. "Now you know who holds the future of Reed & Sons." My father slammed the table so hard the plates jumped, and the crystal water glasses toppled in a chain reaction. One rolled off the edge and exploded on the hardwood. Mom was still half slumped on the floor, Drake cradling her shoulders, Valerie screaming something about lawsuits and police. The chandelier above us trembled like it might come down. I waited until the noise crested and shattered into ragged breathing. Then I reached inside my coat, pulled out one final slim black leather folder, and placed it dead center on the ruined Christmas tablecloth right on top of Sawyer's closed aluminum case. Sawyer stepped forward, flipped it open for them, and stepped back. Inside lay a single cashier's check for 350,000 United States dollars, drawn on my personal operating account at First Republic Bank, and beneath it, a 15-page agreement titled Full and Final Release of All Claims, Interests, and Inheritance Rights in Reed and Sons, its subsidiaries' assets, and any family trust. I spoke for only the second time that night, voice perfectly level. That check is yours the instant the last signature is witnessed and notarized. In exchange, Anthony Joyce Valerie and Drake Reed permanently and irrevocably release every present and future claim to Reed and Sons, its real estate inventory, trademarks, bank accounts, and any trust or estate that might ever exist. You walk away tonight with $350,000, enough for a modest condominium, 2 used cars, and a quiet life somewhere far from Oak Brook. You refuse, and the foreclosure sales begin at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Everything goes to the highest bidder. Your decision. The room went so quiet I could hear the snow hitting the windows. Grandma Eleanor let go of my hand, reached across the table, picked up the heavy Montblanc pen, turned straight to the witness signature page, and wrote Eleanor Margaret Reed in her beautiful old-fashioned cursive. Then she capped the pen, set it down, and gave the table the calmest, most radiant smile I had ever seen on her face. That smile destroyed them. Valerie grabbed the pen next. Her manicured hand shook so violently the ink bled into tiny spikes. She scrawled Valerie Ann Reed like she was stabbing the paper, then hurled the pen across the table so hard it bounced off Dad's plate. I hope every dollar burns you. Drake took it after her. Tears of pure rage streamed down his cheeks. He signed Drake Anthony Reed in angry slashes, muttering unbelievable and psycho under his breath the entire time. Mom had been helped back into her chair by Drake. She was ghost-pale mascara running in black rivers. She stared at the cashier's check as if it might disappear then, at me, then at the signature line. Her hand shook like a leaf in wind. Joyce Marie Reed appeared in the same looping cursive she once used on my elementary school permission slips. When she finished, she let the pen roll away and buried her face in her trembling hands. Dad remained standing, looming over the document like he could intimidate it into vanishing. His chest rose and fell in furious bursts. The grandfather clock in the hall began to chime 9:30. He stared at the signature block for a full minute, pride and terror at war across every line of his face. Finally, he snatched the pen. The first stroke ripped the paper. He pressed harder, slower, until Anthony James Reed was carved into the page in thick, dark lines, the same hand that once signed my college rejection letters telling me to get serious. He dropped the pen like it was on fire. Sawyer moved immediately. He verified every signature, initialed each page in red, applied his Illinois notary seal, and embossed stamp to the final execution page, then slid the original executed set into a fresh manila envelope and placed bound certified copies in front of Dad. The cashier's check is valid and negotiable tonight, he said. The debt has been marked paid and satisfied in full as of 9:32 p.m. All foreclosure proceedings are permanently terminated. You may deposit the funds immediately. He closed everything, tucked the envelope under his arm, and stepped aside. The dining room was silent except for Mom's broken, hiccuping sobs and the soft tick of cooling wax from the candles. I rose from my chair. Grandma Eleanor stood with me, linking her arm through mine without hesitation. I looked at each of them one last time. Dad stared at the table, shoulders collapsed. Valerie's hands were clenched so tight her knuckles were white. Drake held Mom while she cried into his soaked hoodie. Grandma's grip was warm, proud, unbreakable. I spoke once more, softly, clearly, for the final time that night. Merry Christmas. Then I turned and walked out of the dining room, Grandma Eleanor at my side, Sawyer 2 steps behind, carrying the only thing left of the empire they once swore I would never touch my name on every line that mattered. I helped Grandma into the Mercedes while snow kept falling. Sawyer closed her door, gently circled to the driver's seat, and pulled away from the house without looking back. The Christmas lights blurred into streaks of red and gold through the rear window. Grandma Eleanor rested her head against the heated leather seat and let out a long, quiet breath. "You okay?" I asked. She reached over and patted my hand. "Better than I've been in 40 years, baby." We drove in silence to the small 2-bedroom condo I had bought her 6 months earlier in downtown Hinsdale. She had refused anything larger. "I've got too many memories in big houses," she'd said. "I want peace now." That night, she fell asleep in her recliner before the fireplace wrapped in the cashmere blanket I gave her. I kissed her forehead and left Sawyer waiting downstairs. 6 months later, he'd passed like a slow exhale. The Oak Brook mansion sold at auction for $4.9 million, barely enough to cover the remaining liens after I released the primary mortgage. Dad moved into a 1-bedroom rental in Wheaton. Mom filed for divorce 31 days later. The papers cited irreconcilable differences. She took half the cashier's check and disappeared to a condo in Naples, Florida. No forwarding address. Aunt Valerie's real estate license was suspended after 3 ethics complaints from former vendors. Last I heard, she was selling handbags at a department store in Schaumburg, working commission only. Drake lasted 3 weeks at a car dealership before he was fired for showing up late. Now he drives for Uber Eats in the same black hoodie he wore that Christmas Eve, the one still faintly stained with Mom's mascara. Reed and Sons became Reed Financial Collective under my full ownership. I kept 3 flagship stores, rebranded the rest, and turned the company profitable again within 9 months. The employees who stayed got raises and equity. The ones who had mocked me years ago found new jobs quickly. Grandma Eleanor never asked for a penny. She spent her days reading gardening on her tiny balcony and calling me every Sunday at exactly 4 o'clock. Some Sundays she told stories about Grandpa starting the first store with a $5,000 loan in 1981. Some Sundays she just listened to me talk about work and said, "I'm proud of you, Mackenzie," every single day. The next Christmas Eve arrived soft and quiet. Snow fell again, but this time it felt gentle. I drove to her condo with a small Fraser fir in the trunk and 2 mugs of homemade cocoa spiked with peppermint schnapps. She greeted me at the door in red plaid pajamas and the fuzzy socks I bought her the year before. We decorated the little tree with only 12 ornaments, 1 for each year I had been gone and 1 extra for the year I came back. No hired caterers. No string quartet. Just the crackle of the fireplace and Bing Crosby singing low from an old record player. She handed me a small wrapped box at midnight. Inside was the original note she had slipped into my coat pocket 8 years earlier, the one with her phone number in blue ink, now laminated and framed. "Real family," she said, tapping the glass stays when you have nothing left to give. I felt my eyes burn for the first time in years. We sat on the floor in front of the fire, backs against the couch legs stretched out like we were 20 and 70 again. The tree lights blinked red, green, gold. Outside the world was white and silent. I raised my mug. To the only person who never declared me dead. She clinked hers against mine. To the granddaughter who proved every single one of them wrong. We drank. The cocoa was sweet and warm. The fire popped. The snow kept falling. And for the first time in my entire life, Christmas felt exactly like home.